All right, folks, so I'm going to do my full moon video a little bit earlier than normal. Usually I do my full moon videos about 48 hours before full moon. I'm going to do this one a little bit earlier than normal. The full moon in Pisces on Wednesday, August the 30th for me, at about 6:36 p.m. is, the specific time, is conjunct Saturn. Now, technically, full moons are one of the few astrological happenings where I consider separating transits. So there are approaching transits where a transit is on its way to happening, and there are separating transits where a transit has already happened and we're still within, let's just say, 5 to 7 degrees, for some people 10 degrees, for some people even wider, moving away from the the transit, whatever it is, has happened. Now this is a full moon conjunct Saturn. The moon is already, as you can see, growing in size, so to speak. Is more and more of the disk of the moon is getting exposed to the sun, and or more accurately, the moon is moving closer and closer to being opposite the sun at the time of the full moon, and excuse me, I'm just recovering from a cough, and a few the conjunction with Saturn in Pisces happens just a few hours before the moon is full. So while by that time the moon is already starting to separate from Saturn, we can't really ignore the conjunction with Saturn. The other reason we can't ignore the conjunction with Saturn is at the time of the full moon, the sun is opposite the moon. And tomorrow, on August the 27th Pacific time, the sun opposes Saturn. Now, when the sun opposes a planet, when the sun opposes the moon, you can consider it a full moon, and the moon's characteristics are amplified. The disk of the moon is fully exposed. When the sun opposes any planet, so what we're dealing with, excuse me, this cough is going to drive me bananas. When the sun opposes Saturn, for example, or any other planet, you can call it a full moon, a full Venus, a full Saturn. The planet is at its most visible. The entire disk of the planet is opposing the sun, so it is visible. And it is shining bright. And so whatever that characteristic is that planet, excuse me. Oh, I'm so frustrated with this cough. I'm so sorry. Whatever this plan of action is with regard to whatever the characteristic, bottom line is this. Tomorrow we have a full Saturn, and on Wednesday we have a full moon. And on its way to becoming full, on Wednesday, the moon is going to conjunct Saturn. Saturn is a planet that stands for getting serious about things, responsibility, taking ourselves seriously, taking matters related to the house where Saturn is transiting seriously. It is a sobering planet. It is a restrictive planet. It is a getting real planet. It is a life on planet Earth planet. It is a time-space planet. It is a rules of the game planet. It is a 3D governing 3D planet. So it is not a planet that encourages delusional behavior. It is not a planet that it is a cause and effect karmic planet, and it is very much a you get out of something what you put into it. So watch your intentions and watch your effort. Saturn is an effortful planet. It's a planet that demands discipline, and taking ourselves seriously and taking our potential seriously and taking our desires and our ambitions seriously. Saturn entered Pisces earlier this year in March of 2023, and so it's an important transit because the sign of Pisces, as I mentioned numerous times before, has really been getting rather a battering since 2015-16 when we had the South Node going through it with Chiron there. We've had a few Mercury retrogrades there during that time, and since then we've had Neptune there the entire time. We had Jupiter go over it a couple of years ago, and now of course we have Saturn here. And during Saturn's time here, the South Node, excuse me, the North Node, Mercury of course is also retrograde now, right now, is going to enter Pisces in about a year and a half or so. So this cycle of taking the Pisces and right now, especially because we have planets going through Virgo. Specifically, we've had Mars go through Virgo over the last 45 days or so, and Mars opposed Saturn and has opposed Neptune, and tomorrow gets ready to go into Libra. We had Mercury oppose Saturn, get ready to oppose Neptune, but then go retrograde, and it's going to go direct, of course, on September 15th, and finally oppose Neptune at the end of September. And we have the Sun now in Virgo, opposing Saturn tomorrow, and then as we head to the new moon in Virgo, about 16, 17, 18 days from now, we're gonna have to contend with the fact that that new moon opposes Neptune. So these, and then, you know, at some point Venus, after it's direct and on September the 4th and is getting ready to enter Virgo in October, is going to oppose Saturn and oppose Neptune during its time there. So with all these planets transiting Virgo, they are going to naturally oppose Saturn and then Neptune. And it only exaggerates or makes important during the month of August and during the month of September, and even to some extent in October when we come to Venus. There's a need to pay attention to and get real about and have a plan of action around those circumstances in the sign of Pisces that have been a drain to us. They could have been a drain through loss and theft and deceit and murky behavior, and they could be a drain to us because we're being too Neptunian and too resigned and too, whatever will be, and not focusing on our boundaries enough. Well, with Saturn now in this part of the chart, boundaries will become important. It all depends on where Pisces is in your chart. So if Pisces is in the first or the second house and Saturn are sort of going through your first and second house, it's about you imposing your boundaries. If we're talking about Pisces being in your 7th or 8th house, it could be others, partners, imposing their boundaries and having to manage your responsibility to them, or and we have the full moon conjunct Saturn. So the disk of the moon, well, let's look at it this way. With the Sun opposing Saturn, it's very likely or very possible that increasingly over the past 4 or 5 days, you have been feeling a sense of restriction, fear, responsibility, get realness about the Pisces part of your chart. Okay, where does Pisces sit in your chart? What house does it occupy? And what does that house stand for? The Sun is in Virgo. Because Saturn is retrograde in the first few degrees of Pisces, even as the Sun was getting ready to leave Leo and has now entered Virgo, this sense of, in the middle of what are expansive energies, this is the way I would summarize this full moon and the energy of the time and this kind of focus on Saturn and Pisces. In the middle of what are expansive energies, both with the Venus retrograde and with the Mercury retrograde, as you would imagine with expansive energies, there's a need to keep your hand on the steering wheel and stay real about certain things and get real about certain things and be clear that expansiveness is dependent on how grounded we are, or else we could sabotage the expansiveness, sabotage the opportunities, not build enough resilience, staying power, care into how we're going to get from point A to point Z or P or E or F or G or whatever it is that Venus and Mercury are trying to do. Remember that we've had planets, as they've moved through Leo and into Virgo, trine the North Node. Remember that the Leo new moon that occurred less than 2 weeks ago, and we're going to remain in this Leo new moon cycle till the middle of September, trined the North Node. Remember that Venus, as it continues its retrograde journey through Leo, has squared Jupiter and Uranus in Taurus and trined Chiron in Aries. It's going to do those three aspects 3 times: direct, retrograde, and direct. Remember that Mercury from Virgo has trined Jupiter once, is getting ready to trine Jupiter a second time, and then once it goes direct, it's going to trine Jupiter again. So the expansiveness in the Taurus part of our chart, where we had the last of the North Node eclipses in Taurus on October 28th, and the expansiveness related to the fact that the North Node has now moved into Aries. So as planets get done with their sort of transits through Leo to enter Virgo, have trined the North Node in Aries, as well as us just simply being in a new moon cycle where this trine is relevant, because the new moon in Leo less than 2 weeks ago trined the North Node in Aries. In the middle of these expansive energies, we are all of a sudden highly likely that we're feeling uneasy about, cautious about, red flagged about the Pisces part of our chart. And there's a need to pay attention to the red flags and to keep it real. When the sun is involved, a lot of the energy and the attention is internal. When the sun is in Virgo, starting what is popularly known as Virgo season, although for me, we're still technically, as far as I'm concerned, in Leo season. Until the new moon cycle in Leo is done, we're still in Leo season. For me, the start of Virgo season happens in the middle of September, when the new moon in Virgo happens just before Mercury goes direct, and it trines Uranus in Taurus. Another expansive new moon. That opposes Neptune in Pisces. There's a balancing act. There's a correlation between the expansiveness in Aries and Taurus that is being supported by the retrogrades in Leo and Virgo. But this expansiveness is dependent on and underpinned by care related to the Pisces part of our chart. There's an opportunity with these planets going through Virgo and opposing Saturn and Neptune in Pisces. There's an opportunity to come up with a plan of action to stop the bleeding in the Pisces part of the chart, to address loss, to address deceit, to address loose boundaries. And at the same time, as the planets go through Virgo, a lot of this relationship with the Pisces energies are around building, using, developing resources in the Virgo part of our chart with care and intention. What is the best possible plan related to the Virgo part of the chart that could serve the Pisces part of the chart? I say that because when planets oppose each other, the faster moving or the weaker planet is being called upon in an opposition to serve the slower moving or more powerful planet. And both the planets in Pisces are slower moving and more powerful than the faster moving personal planets in Virgo. We're talking about Saturn and Neptune in Pisces, and we're talking about Mars, Mercury, the Sun, the new moon, and Venus in Virgo. So there's a lot of energy in the sign of Virgo, and we need to be thinking about how we're going to build, and we're doing our annual review on the Virgo part of our chart, and we're thinking about and communicating and planning and have taken action. And when Venus comes into that part of the chart, we may see a certain amount of gain or luck or greater smoothness in that part of the chart. But at the same time, we're being called upon to consider how we're building plans in the Virgo part of our chart in such a way that they will contribute to addressing weaknesses in the Pisces part of the chart. Now, as I said, we're in the middle of expansive energies that don't quite resolve themselves and don't. Progress starts to happen first after Venus goes direct on September 3rd and 4th. Then the next gate is Mercury going direct on September 15th. Then the next gate is both Mercury and Venus clearing their shadow degrees by the end of September, early October. And then we've really got a lunation that is kind of unsullied by anything that is putting a damper on forward movement, and that is the Libra eclipse in the middle of October. Now, expansive energies bring us in touch with where we want to go. And in the middle of a lot of preparation for change, not change itself, but preparation for change right now, certainly while both Venus and Mercury are retrograde, it could very much be that we're in a space of recovering our energy and recovering from analyzing and thinking about our relationship and financial issues. And in the throes of planning how we're going to move forward and avail of some of the opportunities that have presented themselves so far, and more opportunities may continue to present themselves over the next few weeks. The expansiveness has a pregnancy to it, and I'm referring to the last 3 videos I've done on Mercury retrograde, the new moon in Leo, and Venus retrograde. We're in dream and plan mode and recover mode. We haven't yet boarded the plane that we're meant to board, either for some people by the middle of September or by the end of September. Really, at the end of the day, there's a plane that we are moving towards boarding by the end of September, middle of October. Now, that doesn't mean that if some of you have to board a plane to be somewhere, something like that, prior to that, that you shouldn't do it, or it's not going to happen, or whatever. The plane boarding is only a weak example insofar as people may, in this preparatory energy, some people may need to travel, some people may need to be somewhere. This statement that I'm making will make sense. Greater clarity about where we're going and how we're getting there, and what the plan of action is, and where we're going to be growing and developing, and which plans and opportunities are going to hold, and which will fall apart or will need to fall by the wayside, are really going to become clearer by the end of September, and for some people by the middle of October. Now, this might sound really strange because, as I said, the energies are expansive and there's opportunities and there's action and there's activities happening. That's fine. You may even be, some people may be preparing for bigger changes even between now and the middle of September. Fine. But I can guarantee you almost that there's still a jello to the wall quality related to those opportunities in the Taurus and Aries part of the chart. It's not, the cake has not been baked yet. The cake is not ready to serve. We're not ready. We don't yet know which opportunities are going to hold or not. So if we think that in terms of which opportunities are going to hold or not, and what we're going to be working on, and what's going to be solid, and what can we depend on, not showing up with clarity, at least until Venus starts to go direct and then Mercury goes direct. And we're sort of in this time, by the end of September, we may well have a roadmap, and by the middle of October, we may be ready to board the plane. That's how I'm going to describe this. I'm going to stick to it. And if in the meantime you actually have to physically board a plane or a train or go somewhere or be somewhere or be planning things or making your mind up or whatever it is or deciding things, by all means do whatever it is that you need to in order for things to feel right. If you are resigning from things or moving, you know, all that kind of, you do what it is that you need to do. Just keep in mind that while Mercury is retrograde, anything that you decide in a certain that things is still fluid. A great way to use this energy right now is in planning and rethinking plans and really going, what are going to be the obstacles as I move forward over the next couple of months? If I have something I need to do, if I have something I need to approach, is this plan really going to hold? Is it going to have to be this plan? Is there a different way of doing things? Part of the frustration and the energy around this time is that there's a sense that things are moving and motion is going to be necessary shortly, but we don't yet have the final itinerary, and we really shouldn't push for the final itinerary while Mercury is retrograde, unless you absolutely have to literally make some sort of trip in the next, you know, till by September 15th, 16th, 17th, in which case you got to do what you got to do. But I will tell you that even if you do, that's not the opportunity I'm talking. That's actually something you'll be doing to set yourself up for potentially other opportunities to come. But also, if you do it during Mercury retrograde, is it going to be one of those things where you are actually moving forward only to realize after the middle of September that something about this needs to be rethought? All of this kind of energy, it's all a way of saying a lot of the energy right now is very internal. And that feels like it's the right thing to be doing. Things are not set, things are not defined. It's a time to go over plans and not settle quite so quickly until you really know, okay, this is how we're going to do this. This is going to be the path forward. And be open over the next couple of weeks till September 15th for there to be surprises and to deal with the inconveniences of Mercury retrograde. But while we're pondering this expansiveness, and while we're waiting for the doors with our names on them to open by the end of September and us to start to go through those doors, or actually go through those doors by the middle of October, there's a need to think about how are we going to responsibly manage the Pisces part of our chart? Because there's some sort of correlation between managing that part of our chart responsibly and with an eye towards resilience and longevity, because that kind of responsible, cautious, restrictive, don't lose sight of this set of commitments, in the Pisces part of your chart, it's not as easy as boarding a plane. There's something about the Pisces part of our chart that really needs, and as I said, as the sun has been getting ready to oppose Saturn tomorrow, over the past 5 days, would not surprise me if internally, from your subconscious, from the source part of yourself, Spirit has been going, hey, I need you to pay attention to this, waving a red flag. And it wouldn't be surprising if you're really in touch with yourself and in touch with source and how you manage that kind of energy, where you're going, let me hit the pause button, or let me hit the caution button, and let me really look at what I'm doing in the Pisces part of my chart to help aid or to take it responsibly. It could be possible that there are restrictions in that part of the chart. It could be that those restrictions serve a purpose, because when certain things are restricted, or resources are restricted, or opportunities are restricted, sometimes it is sort of a karmic way, or the universe's way, or the Spirit's way of pushing us through a particular door, because we just don't have the resources or the opportunities to go through multiple doors or consider certain things. But in this interplay between us and Spirit, us and Saturn, very possible over the last 5 days and as you head towards tomorrow, for there to be an awareness of red flags and care needed, and a certain restrictiveness in the Pisces part of our chart, that by the time we get to the full moon, on August the 30th reaches some kind of climax. The climax could be that they, if this is happening in a financial part of the chart, it may be that you are aware that by the time the full moon happens, certain payments or certain things need to be made. But in your journey to that point, the Sun and Saturn by tomorrow are basically saying, okay, well, this is coming up and but this is what it means. And this is how you have to handle this part of the chart over the next few weeks to get you to that point. And it may be that the payment does need to be made on August the 30th, for example, or it may be something comes to some sort of a completion, fruition, manifestation, but it could also be that something that is a bit of a red, excuse me, I'm so sorry. It could also be that something that has a red flag quality to it by tomorrow reaches with the full moon an emotional and intuitive awareness. That could be emotional, that could be a meltdown, that could be a cause for concern, that could be a cause for panic, that could be a cause for conversation. That could mean that someone is either throwing a tantrum at you, I'm talking about the full moon, or you are throwing a tantrum at them. In which case, if a tantrum is actually happening and someone is actually having a full moon moment, or there's anger, or there's expression, or there's tears, or there's sorrow, or there's frustration, if it's you or if it's someone else directing it towards you, if you're in that kind of space, pay attention to what's happening, because something emotional is coming to the surface. And while the content may be messy or delivered in a messy way, it's important because it is hinting at some sort of emotional truth regarding a particular situation or how someone is feeling. The other thing that is really worth mentioning is that 2 months before the lunar eclipse in Taurus, of course, is August the 28th. I would encourage you to look at this last week that has happened, the week before and after August the 28th. The full moon happens on the 30th. I would encourage you to look at it through the lens of the eclipse. If you have a chart of the eclipse overlaid on your birth chart, for example, and this is more for astrology aficionados who can do this kind of stuff, you may well see a correlation between what has been developing this last week, the week before and after August 28th. And indeed, for some of us, the eclipse or some aspect of the eclipse may be showing up now. Some conversation with the eclipse is happening the week before and after August the 28th. There doesn't have to be a huge correlation between the full moon in Pisces and the eclipse 2 months from now. It's not so much about the full moon in Pisces per se, but there is something about the full moon in Pisces and needing to take the Pisces part of the chart seriously and responsibly, and to get real about it, and to have a plan, to not be delusional. It is not, when Saturn is involved, there's only room for soberness and seriousness. It is like you are studying for a critical exam that will determine your future. If you've been training to go to the Olympics and it's a qualifying thing, if it has to be done with that kind of seriousness. If it's a piano competition or a vocal competition, or it's that kind of stuff, it's a sports meet. If you care, if it's important to you, it has to have that kind of diligence and it has to have that kind of all hands on deck, no goofing around, no fooling around, no relying on luck, total eye on the ball. Because the eye on the ball in the Pisces, there's something about the Pisces, God damn it. Sorry. There's something about the, and remember, the planets in Virgo are not only opposing the planets in Pisces, but they're also trining Jupiter in Taurus. They're also encouraging So as you go through, you've just gone through Mars in Virgo, you're going through Mercury in Virgo, retrograde and then direct after September the 15th. The sun is going to go through Virgo, and we're going to have the new moon in the middle of September on September 14th. Venus is going to enter Virgo in October. As these planets go through October, they are absolutely supporting expansiveness. Venus is going to trine the North Node again on her way after she's direct between Leo and in Aries. Again, setting up this conversation that just got set up with the new moon in Leo, which trined the North Node in Aries less than 2 weeks ago. Expansive. Talking to the Aries part of our chart. Mercury 3 times is going to trine Jupiter in the Taurus part of our chart, where Jupiter is trying to create an auspicious new beginning, end a 12-13-year cycle, start a 12-13-year cycle. Fine, it's a start, but it's an expansive energy. The sun is going to trine Jupiter. Venus is going to trine Jupiter. Some people consider Venus-Jupiter positive transits just... I am less kind of internet friendly with, oh my God, you know, milk and honey is going to flow. Venus trines Jupiter enough times during the course of a year, you know, we can sort of keep our hats on. But it's a wonderful transit all the same. While it's in Leo, Venus, I've said this before, Venus is going to square Jupiter and Uranus again for the third and final time after it goes direct on September the 4th. So, but at the same time, as these planets in Virgo, now Mercury, the Sun, the new moon, and Venus put our attention onto the Virgo part of our chart. Where does Virgo sit in your chart? What house does it occupy? What does it stand for? It is both feeding the expansiveness in Taurus as we head towards the October 28th full moon eclipse. And looking at that eclipse, you've got to pay attention to what's going on the week before and after August 28th, this last week and this next week. And eclipsy stuff is changes, big changes. This is why when I gave that boarding the plane analogy, typically I'm not that cautious about it. The only reason why I'm cautious about it is that some of the changes, we're in the middle of pregnant changes. A lot of us would be. Pregnant changes. And yet I'm talking about the changes that actually count as being the doors we're going to walk through and know about by the end of September, starting the middle of September, but by the end of September and into October. We already have a sense of what some of these opportunities in some of these directions are prior to Mercury going retrograde. So in the middle of this pregnant expansive time, these planets also point to conservatism and a plan of action to handle and manage issues related to the Pisces part of our chart that have been going on since 2015-16, even before. And in the shorter term, I'm talking the last week heading towards Wednesday. But remember that we've still got the Sun's opposition to Neptune with the new moon opposite Neptune in the middle of September. We've still got Venus opposing both Saturn and Neptune to come in October. A kind of all hands on deck, and while the Virgo part of our chart is in conversation with the expansive energies in Taurus, it is also, there's a real need, and I know I'm saying this multiple times, but repetition is helpful and important. There's a real need to pay attention to how to responsibly meet and manage obligations in the Pisces part of our chart. And nowhere is this awareness or this red flag flare up stronger than in the last 4 or 5 days as we head to the Sun opposing Saturn tomorrow, August the 27th, and as we head to the full moon on Wednesday, August the 30th. Because that is the conjunction with Saturn. And the Sun opposing Saturn makes Saturn full. So we're dealing with the awareness of Saturn kind of saying, here I am, and here's what I need you to focus on, and here's where I need you to be careful, and here's where I am blowing the whistle from the side of the field as you run around, encouraging you to get back on track and to pay attention to what I'm trying to point out to you so that you don't fall into a ditch. But then with the full moon, we have our emotional, intuitive side going, by Wednesday. Why? I don't know. We'll see. Is it because something you already know needs to be done and reaches sort of a peak moment? And with full moons, remember, the positive side of it is that there could be endings or offers or culminations. But culminations can also mean that something happens that, that is a peak or a culmination around which red flags are around. I just gave you the perfect example. It could, if it's not happening in the financial part of a chart, if it's happening in a part of the chart that has to do with a relationship, it could be that there's an awareness of something, of a fly in the ointment, of some part of the relationship that we need to take seriously. And I've already told you, if the Pisces part of the chart sits in the parts of the houses that stand for us, it could be us increasingly feeling like I need to set a boundary. If it's happening in the partner's part of the chart, it could be the partner coming to us and saying, I need to set a boundary. But it could be an awareness that something needs to be addressed. And then by the time we hit the full moon on Wednesday, either we get further proof that something needs to be addressed, something becomes real, or our fears about something that need to be addressed reach some sort of a peak, or the conversation happens. This something needs to be addressed conversation that we have intimations about. Is it an opportunity? Yes, to start handling and to continue to handle, to have a plan of action related to the Pisces part of our chart. Sorely needed, and will not be without its challenges and tests, because Saturn is going to continue to be in Pisces for another couple of years and is going to conjunct Neptune while he's there eventually, as that transit comes to a close. But we've needed Saturn's energy in the Pisces part of our chart and the North Node entering the Pisces part of a chart in about a year and a half's time to stop the bleeding, to manage a crisis in the Pisces part of the chart that has been going on for a long time, since 2014, 15, 16 at least. But that is when it started to make its presence felt. And so now, in a relatively small way, the opposition Sun opposes Saturn every year. It is a time of reckoning. It is a time of paying attention to. It is a time when the Sun opposes Saturn to do the annual internal solar review of the Virgo part of the chart. But then as it gets ready to oppose Saturn, Saturn also says, but here I am. How are you going to serve me from the Virgo part of your chart in terms of what I'm trying to do and impose a sense of responsibility and restriction and cleaning things up and sorting things out in the Pisces part of your chart? Short term, long term. Short term, in service to the expansiveness in the Aries and Taurus part of our chart. Long term, because Saturn is going to be here for a couple of years, and there are crises that have been needed to be managed in the Pisces part of the chart for a long time. But then we also have, for the final time, full moon in conjunct Saturn on Wednesday, where something is going to come to some sort of intense, and it can be quiet. It can just be like, all right, here it is. I've got to finish this and this and this. But by doing this, this is what these red flags were about. Or it could be more emotional, or it could be more of a meltdown. And with Mercury retrograde in the mix, it could also mean that plans continue to change and shift and create a certain amount of confusion. I don't know which way we're going to go, and I know how I'm going to get this, and I know what the obstacles, and how I'm going to deal with this. And, I can tell that there are things that have to shift after the middle of September, but I don't know how I'm going to catch it. I don't have a plan in place. Fine, that's the whole point of an effective Mercury in retrograde. Is for Mercury to go reverse and say, let's rethink this. Let's look at this again. The other transit that is happening at the time of this full moon, that the full moon encodes, is a retrograde Mercury trining Jupiter. So retrograde Mercury in Virgo trines Jupiter. So somewhere this Mercury retrograde transit, and I'm not going to say a lot about it, is supporting the expansiveness of Jupiter and Taurus, and the fact that Jupiter and Taurus is trying to create a new beginning there, a new 12, 13-year cycle, and end a 12, 13-year cycle. By there, I mean the Taurus part of your chart. As far as rulership is concerned, it's fascinating and it's so clear. It's a full moon in Pisces. Pisces is ruled by Neptune and Jupiter. Neptune is in Pisces. And Neptune has been denoting this sense of asceticism, this sense of mysticism that we've been bringing to the Pisces part of our chart in the middle of all this stuff that's been going on. With Saturn's entry now, we've really got to make decisions around, do we release and let go whatever it is, wherever the losses are in the Pisces part of the chart, or do we now start to address them and deal with them and figure out where the lines are, whether we're imposing the lines or others are imposing the lines on us. Jupiter is in Taurus. Taurus is ruled by Venus. Venus is in Leo. Leo is ruled by the Sun. The Sun is in Virgo. Virgo is ruled by Mercury. Mercury, a retrograde Mercury, is in its own sign. So the two dispositors of the chart are Neptune in Pisces and Mercury in Virgo. At the time of the full moon, we've got the moon in Pisces and the Sun in Virgo. So all these energies revving us up, prepping us. Mercury, after he's direct, or they're direct, after the middle of September. Venus, when she comes into Virgo. The new moon in the middle of September, which sets us up for effort and action in the Virgo part of the chart. At the same time, it's almost like the full moon in Pisces is revving up the urgency to address and make changes and grow the Virgo part of our chart. Does that make sense? Typically, a new moon happens in a certain part of the chart and a full moon, not typically. There are two types of full moons. Sometimes a new moon happens in a part of a chart and a full moon happens in its opposite part of the chart 2 weeks after. And sometimes the full moon happens first and the new moon happens after. And that's where we're at now. The full moon happens first in Pisces right now, with the sun already in Virgo. And 2 weeks later, the new moon happens. And so somewhere, this red flagness, this awareness, is lighting a fire under us to ensure that all the developments that are occurring, in the process of occurring, in the process of becoming more solid after the new moon in the middle of September, with Mercury going direct and then with Venus coming in October, serve the red flags that Saturn is putting up and saying, this is, you've got to sort this out. And remember, Neptune is one of the dispositors of the chart for this full moon, and these planets are going to oppose Neptune as they go through Virgo. So it is very much in line with taking the Pisces part of our chart seriously and not getting or remaining too laid back about it. And you're not going to be able to anyway, because in the short term, you had the sun get ready to oppose Saturn tomorrow and the full moon conjunct Saturn. So it's very much a time to, enjoy the expansiveness and lean into it. You have no choice to, and we don't always get transits like this that are expansive. But absolutely, this past week and this coming week, and at least till Wednesday, the expansiveness is undeniable. And for some people, even eclipsy, significant change, eclipse-like change. The turning of a book, not just a chapter. So if you're reading War and Peace, like I am right now, it's not a chapter. It's 30 chapters that make a book among 12 books in this now. It's a significant transition that could be in the works for some people because it's 2 months before a lunar eclipse, for God's sakes. And I listen, no question in my mind that 2 months before lunar eclipse is significant and is in conversation. And I am telling you, if you look at what is happening this past week and this coming week, and you look at the lunar eclipse chart and where the activities are in the Taurus part of your chart at the time of October 28th, I would not be surprised if you're like, oh, that which is supposed to be in place by that time is actually happening now. In the middle of it all is the Pisces part of the chart saying, expand as much as you want, change as much as you want, but you got to get real about this part of the chart, because if you don't, I will sink you. So getting real about the Pisces part of the chart and remaining real about it, and not being casual about it, being careful about it, is critically important for this expansiveness to be successful. And the sun's opposing Saturn tomorrow, with the full moon conjuncting Saturn on Wednesday, are raising all of last week and till next week. In the middle of the expansiveness, there's this awareness with something concrete happening by Wednesday that makes it clear and makes it real that while we can dream and expand and be excited about the expansiveness in the Aries and the Taurus part of our chart, and what a direct Venus is going to try and do, and what a direct Mercury is going to try and do, and what the Sun and what the new moon are going to try and do, there's also complete clarity that the pressure is going to be on from the Pisces part of the chart to put attention into the Leo and especially the Virgo part of our chart to serve that, because the expansiveness is dependent on, is built upon needing to have a solid foundation in the Pisces part of that chart. And the Pisces part of the chart is going to be served directly by the Virgo part of our chart. And it is that awareness that we have and that we are having. One final thing that I'm going to say is, if you're to take one thing from this video, is just if there's something with Saturn, boundaries, and boundaries sometimes are boundaries against other people, but they're also boundaries against ourselves. It's also a boundary against our shadow side. And being boundaried is a very important. Pay all the attention you need to take the Pisces part of your chart seriously. And to ensure that as you think through with all these transits happening in Virgo and the new moon to come and Venus to come, how you're going to grow the Virgo part of your chart so that you can secure and manage responsibly, make responsible commitments, follow through on those commitments responsibly, know when to end a commitment and to back away from something. Know while Mercury is still retrograde and getting ready to go direct on September 15th that things may change, that you may need to be flexible. Serve the expansiveness by keeping the Pisces part of the chart totally real. Okay, I know I've repeated myself a few times, but it's just different ways of giving you the information. For those people for whom Pisces falls in the first or the second house or the seventh or the eighth house, from a relationship perspective, there's of course a financial component to it, but there's also a relationship, that could also be a relationship component to it. And if that is the case, then try to remain in a space of awareness through tomorrow. To the Sun opposition to Saturn is really giving us a sense of, oh wait, oh wow, I need to watch the Pisces part of my chart. By the time we get to the full moon, something may occur that exaggerates, intensifies, gives proof. There's a meltdown towards that part of this. So just if it's a relationship related, just watch the intensity. As we head to the Sun opposing Saturn tomorrow, I think it's very important to remain in a place of observation. I would advise remaining in a place of observation in general until Mercury goes direct. I think after Venus goes direct on September 4th, some of the opportunities, etc., might start. We might start to get greater clarity about which doors we're going to be walking through. After Mercury goes direct, middle of September, we will be moving towards walking through them, either by the end of September or middle of October. As I said, that does not mean, because we're dealing with such eclipsy changes this past week and this coming week, that does not mean that we aren't aware that preparatory changes are already afoot, even if we don't know what those doors are. Okay? Bottom line, enjoy the expansiveness all you want, but the real work, but get and remain completely real and completely grounded about the Pisces part of the chart, and how over the next coming months the Virgo part of the chart needs to be developed and flowered, and how the Virgo plant in our chart needs to grow in order to support the Pisces part of our chart and manage it. So make commitments carefully, set boundaries carefully. Set boundaries with yourself carefully so you don't sabotage the Pisces part of your chart, and in doing so, sabotage the potential for expansiveness. Because this Pisces part of it is somehow feeding. It's a very delicate, all the expansiveness is kind of dependent on and risks being threatened by wobbliness in the Pisces part of a chart. And with Saturn there, Saturn is asking us to secure that foundation. And the Sun opposing Saturn tomorrow and the full moon in Saturn are going to bring an awareness to this, if they haven't already. All right. If you found the video useful, feel free to share it. Feel free to comment on it. Feel free to like it. All that kind of stuff gives it greater circulation on YouTube. I will be in touch with my next video. The one other quick thing, my Mercury retrograde video has an error in it. I talk about when a direct Mercury is going to conjunct Mars, and I said it occurs in Libra, but it occurs in Scorpio. Actually, the next video I do is actually going to kind of finalize some points about both Venus and Mercury retrograde, so I'll address that more. But I did want to address that. And this Mercury retrograde cycle, again, because Mercury is going to conjunct, see, this is where, yeah, I'm going to have to address this because Mercury is going to conjunct Mars in Scorpio. Okay, my brain is already firing off on the next video, and I will be in touch soon. Thank you very much for your time.